Yo, what's up everybody? Once again, it's Brand Man Sean, and today we got to talk about something I've seen in the comments quite a few times over, let's just say the last few months. People making statements like, people don't need connections. Artists don't need connections. So we got to answer that question. Do artists really need connections? Because hey, some people are independent and there's so many resources out there today. What's the answer? Hell yeah. You already know my answer is yes. Otherwise, why would I have come out with a networking guide recently? But don't just take my word for it. Let's check out this interview on Everyday Struggle where DJ Academics was talking to Carl Cherry from Apple Music.
It's true. And a lot of artists who've had a big year, the Daniel Caesars, people like Black, I feel like Apple and like the playlist really championed those guys and really gave them a chance to flourish.
Absolutely.
Black and Daniel Caesar. Two artists that Nadeska brought up saying that Apple championed them, and Carl Cherry was basically like, yep.
I mean, so real quick though. So here's how the here's how like the process is, right? Technically, right? There's a label rep at the label. Let's use Renat as an example, at Interscope. He talks to a label rep at Apple, who's in charge of the entire universal relationship. He deals with Interscope, Republic, whoever else, Def Jam, right? They talk to me. Because if there's too many people, like we need some kind of like wall. It's just gonna be, I mean, it already is overwhelming, but that's basically the way it happens. The label tells our rep the priority and they tell me the priority.
Now these two clips alone are interesting because Carl Cherry mentions Interscope Records. Jimmy Iovine, who is over Apple Music, used to be over Interscope Records. He was the CEO. As a matter of fact, he was also the founder of Interscope Records, but he left that position in 2014, I believe. Interscope announced a record deal with Love Renaissance in 2017, and who's Love Renaissance's biggest artist? Black. One of the artists Nadeska mentioned that they championed. Not to mention that Carl is wearing a Love Renaissance shirt. And by the way, I'm not even saying any kind of heavy politicking was at play. All I'm saying is the value of connections is knowing the right people who might be able to introduce you to the right people or tell you the right people to talk to about something instead of just looking and trying to solve everything by yourself. Just like Daniel Caesar. Daniel Caesar's independent, but his two managers, the producers, they are established producers. They weren't huge in their name, but they had a certain level of collaborations that they were involved in sometime in the industry. So they at least had a strong sense of direction. If they didn't know how to do something or they didn't have the resources themselves, they had an idea of which person to maybe ask.
Ever see artists try to like, you know what I mean? Like, yo, come to my show. Yo, listen, I'm gonna give you this.
Well, not get. Oh, I'll tell you
You
the
be
one.
backstage a lot, bro.
No,
There it is.
No,
Mixing.
I ain't gonna lie to you, bro.
No.
I be at the crib like, yo, culture, you everywhere, man.
But you know, act. You know what that is?
And then everybody show you act, cause you know me, man. I be doing my sleuth shit, man. I'm like, let me go look at this playlist. Oh man, this guy got 5 songs on the list, bro.
Stop it. No. So that's just networking, and I'm not naive about that, right? I do get that. I do get like, and that's not necessarily artists, to be honest. It might be more like managers or actually managers more frequently.
And I know some people are like, oh man, but that's some high level industry stuff. You don't necessarily need to know people on that level. If they had that situation, I don't need it. Yeah, but one of the problems I feel like people have when it comes to saying I don't need connections is thinking all connections have to be on that specific level. It doesn't have to be a label. It doesn't mean that you have to know some big artist or somebody famous. A connection could mean that you know this girl who runs with the promoter because she promotes for him, and a girl might be able to connect you to that promoter, and because he's a promoter, he might be able to help you or push you on, or he has relationships with the radio and things like that. It's just stuff around your town. So if I happen to know somebody who works with Google, Facebook, or Twitter, and they have some ad account that they are at least able to give me like $500 in free ads or something like that, that's a connection. Connections come in many forms of fashion. It doesn't have to be this whole binary, huge music industry or famous entertainment industry person or not. Especially when a lot of those people are going to be hard to get in contact with anyway because people are trying to get to them. You don't have to go that route. There's so many other types of people you can get in contact with. For instance, I was just trying to improve getting on Spotify playlists. And I'm not even talking about just some of the roundabouts. I was also working on pitching directly to Spotify. What did I do? I used some of the same things that I talk about in the networking guide to find somebody who's had experience and success pitching the Spotify playlist. As a matter of fact, she does it for a living. reached out to her, got connected, and she gave me a lot of custom advice for my specific situation that I was working on. She even looked through some things for me. That was all just from cold outreach. I found her, I connected, got some information, and now I'm going to continue to work on rapport building as I continue and do more and more outreach, because at the end of the day, that's what she does specifically for a living, and she's always going to be better than me 9 times out of 10. So I want to keep that relationship so I can continue to learn. But again, there's so many different levels of connections. You can be very creative once you know how to find people, connect with them, and start to build relationships and get information from them. I know people who told me that they were able to get a billboard for their artists because they used to work at a company that helped other people get billboards. Simple stuff like that. Connections come in so many different forms of fashions. It's all about really just knowing how to network. I can't stress enough how much you need connections. You have to be connected with people. This is an industry especially that you need to know people, but it doesn't have to be the traditional people that people are always talking about. Just being connected, period. Nobody does anything alone. We already know that. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to have some form of connection just because there's so much to do. You need leverage. You can't do everything yourself, even within your own team. That's a connection, right? I have a graphic design connection. There's levels to it, obviously, but you can't do it without connections. So please, if you've been telling yourself that you can do it without connections, stop it. Stop selling yourself that narrative and stop selling it to other people. As a matter of fact, if you hear any artist that's big or whatever and they're telling you that they did it alone, stop it. Shut them up. But again, remember, that doesn't mean it has to be connections in the traditional sense that you're always thinking about. But I even talked to an artist just the other day who he knew an artist in the city that he reached out to, and that artist was able to help him get on their local radio station. He's not on iHeart and getting that full DJ Khaled plan, but he can at least get on their local radio station, and that's something. So figure out how to get connections. You can't be a loner and do it all yourself. And go ahead and hit that like button if you like this video. If you like it, you might as well share it. And if you're not subscribed, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button.